Hey entrepreneurs, we have an expert in non-food franchising with us today. Jon Ostenson has spent time both as a franchisor and a franchisee. As a franchisor, he was recently president of ShelfGenie, and currently he is a franchise owner himself in multiple franchise concepts. While that's true, the majority of his time he spends as CEO of FranBridge Capital, where he's matchmaking entrepreneurs with franchisors. We talk about everything from private equity and what place that has in franchising, to which franchise systems he owns himself, what are entrepreneurs asking for out of franchise systems, to what is the process to be able to explore if a franchise system is right for you. Looking forward to you listening to Jon Ostenson.
Jon, thanks for joining us here today on the Entrepreneurs United podcast. See that you're in the franchise consulting, investment space, capital space, and based out of Atlanta. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today before we dive into a little bit of your history?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I get the opportunity to play matchmaker and work with hundreds of entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs across North America, and I help them find the right opportunities in the world that I've dubbed non-food franchising. So we've worked with over 500 brands and, really go deep with these guys, vetted opportunities, and we help our clients understand the ropes of how to navigate the process, how to compare option A versus option B, the funding, the legal, all the different aspects. And the great thing is, and I know we'll delve into this, entrepreneurship, as you know, is live and well. And I think more and more people are waking up to franchising being a great business ownership path outside the world of food.
Interesting. Yeah. And why do you think that is? I have my own theory. I'm sure Rich does as well. A lot of people have resulted to entrepreneurism. I think, especially the past few years, going, look, I can't depend on a company feeding me for 40 years, and I got to take destiny into my own hands here a little bit. That'd be my theory. But what is the other theory as to why you think the interest in franchising specifically has grown?
Yeah, I think the franchising model affords a lot of possibilities, and just the strength of getting to be in business for yourself and not by yourself. You've got a playbook, that you go out and execute day one. You're not questioning product market fit. Mm-hmm. You've got a coach on that sidelines in the franchisor. You've got other franchisees living the same thing day in, day out in their respective markets, trading best practices. And then that exit value down the road is shown by studies to be higher within the franchising world. So, I think there are a lot of desirable traits, but many have oftentimes associated franchising with fast food, and they haven't had an interest in getting into food, and so they've kind of written off franchising. But I think as you see more and more companies now scaling through franchising, private equity is getting really involved on the franchisor side, and I think there's a lot more publicity. I mean, obviously, I'm out there sharing the good news every chance I get about these other opportunities I see people thriving in other sectors.
Got it. And so let's go back a little bit here. How did this come to be? So, I don't believe that you started in franchising. I think you actually started in the business consulting side of things, I believe. Talk to us about the evolution of your career in terms of, obviously you went to University of Georgia, it appears, was in finance, MBA, and then you get into the business world, start a little bit, I think, on the consulting side of things, but talk to us through your evolution and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, like so many of your listeners, started in the corporate world and had a great run and did the whole ladder climb, and was given some neat opportunities, got to do some work internationally, and and work in industries I never thought I'd be in. I just had the luck of saying yes to the right things along the way, and but like so many, I got to my mid 30s and said, gosh, I'm tired of building someone else's empire. I kind of want to build my own, but I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't know how to step into that world. And for me, I kind of stumbled into it. Luckily, I left a large public company to go work with a private company, and that private company happened to be ShelfGenie franchise system, which is custom pull-out shelving for kitchens and pantries, a couple hundred locations across North America. Had the opportunity to step in and serve as president, supporting all of our owners on a day-to-day basis. And for me, that was a pivotal time to really see the power of franchising in setting up newly minted business owners. And long story short, ended up partnering with the founder of ShelfGenie. We spun off. We've invested in franchises ourselves now on the other side of the table. So we went from franchisor to franchisee with a few brands, and I've partnered with other folks as well, and invested on the franchisee side. So through that, I really saw an opportunity and something that I'm passionate about, and that's helping others do what I had the opportunity to do. And so for the past few years, I've had the opportunity to spend most of my time on the brokerage consulting side, working with, again, those that are either looking to make a full-time jump into an owner-operator role, or those looking to diversify their portfolio and get a side hustle going. Franchising lends itself to that in a lot of cases. So, get out there, and I'm doing a lot of educating and helping others enter the process and then make it through.
So I want to dive into this a little bit, because I think I'm catching on to kind of what you're doing today. And if I had to paraphrase it in my own words, there's kind of two components of what, Jon, you're doing today with FranBridge, right? One is you personally are a franchisee in several territories and several different systems. And I relate that a little bit to, I heard recently, not recently, maybe a year or two ago, that, that Shaq owns X amount of Five Burgers restaurants, right? And these chains, and he's invested heavily in different franchises as a franchisee investor. That's one side of the fence. And then the other side of the fence is helping entrepreneurs who want to run their own business, help them connect them with the right franchise system for them. Is that correct? First question. And then I have a follow-up to that.
It is. And fortunately, it's not an even split in my time or efforts. The franchisee side is about 10% of my time right now, because we've gotten good general managers and people in place to run those businesses for us. And so it kind of sets an example of what a lot of my clients are looking to do, of, setting things up that aren't going to require your full-time efforts. But it allows me to spend probably 90% of my time really going deep with these franchise brands, getting to know the leadership team, really vetting them. And we always have new ones coming down that we're analyzing and evaluating. And, we represent them. For our clients, it's a great process. It's entirely free. We never get paid a nickel by our clients. We're funded by the franchise brands. For them, it's a sales and marketing cost, and none of it ever passes on to our clients. So it really allows me to do what I love doing. And that's be very consultative with my clients, helping them understand how do you analyze different opportunities and which ones could be the best fit for you. And this is really interesting, Jon. Over 90% of my clients end up selecting an opportunity that was never on their radar, oftentimes in an industry they hadn't even thought about. So a lot of fun to kind of see the light bulb come on.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And do those two worlds sometimes mingle? So, for example, if I was talking to you about my interest in being an entrepreneur in a franchise system, and you were guiding me along, is it possible that you and I become partners in franchising together? Do those two worlds kind of mingle together?
It has happened. I'd say it's still in beta testing mode. About a year and a half ago, we did it for the first time, where I invested in a client. He'd asked me to, and I said, yeah, it's a no-brainer. I love the model. And since then, we ended up bringing in some other partners, buying him out. Then we bought some other franchise locations and kind of expanded. But I'd say it's something that, from an effort standpoint, a lot of my clients would love to be passive owners and invest in other operators. It can be done, and we do have examples of where we've done that. I'd say it's a little bit like threading the needle, though, trying to make the stars align on all the terms and different parties. But probably 95% of the deals that we do are just straight up for the client, and they'll use different funding mechanisms. It's not necessarily equity partners. It's usually I'd say about 1/3 of my clients are self-funding with cash, because we have record levels of cash on the sidelines. About 1/3 are using SBA loans, and that's very common. And then about 1/3 are using their retirement plans, self-directing the 401ks or IRAs through what we call a ROBS program, where they actually purchase the business through their retirement plan. And then some are using portfolio loans or HELOCs or other avenues.
Gotcha.
I'd love, Jon, to dig in on some of your experience. You were president at ShelfGenie. Is that president of a franchise or multiple franchise, or were you the president of the franchisor?
Of the franchisor, correct.
Okay. And when you were brought in, just kind of curious as to your take on it, what was the opportunity with ShelfGenie at that time? And what was the intentional strategy you developed for growth?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest focus, we were a marketing heavy organization. The custom pull-out shelving space is probably a $60 million space, and ShelfGenie was $50 million of that. So we were creating an industry in a way. A lot of times people didn't know you can use your existing cabinets and have these pull-out shelving solutions. And so a lot of our efforts were around advertising and getting the word out there, and really working closely with the franchise owners, because helping them understand, if they don't have a marketing background, that if you know what they were able to spend on a cost per lead, a cost per appointment, close rates, kind of extrapolating that whole model. So I think there was a lot of educating of the franchise owners to say, hey, even if you're paying $400 a lead in some cases, based on the math and the model, you're still going to make a little money, or at worst be break even on a deal. But then it's free advertising, right? So there's a lot that we're doing on the marketing side, and this was a couple of years back. So on the digital side, we're setting up a lot of agreements with national players, whether it be Valpak, Money Mailer, Clipper, direct mail, as well as programs with some of the larger newspapers, as well as the local guys. We're really into pay for performance. And so that's where I'd say we had the biggest impact and the biggest opportunity. Our call center was humming along, but our media buying team, our digital marketing team, we had to make some headcount decisions there, and also some external partnerships. So a long way of saying that the front end of the spear, the marketing angle, partnering with the franchise owners, supporting them, that was where we spent most of our time.
Got it. And as president there, did you have a franchise advisory board?
We did, the FAC. Yep.
And what were 2 or 3 of the issues maybe that the franchise advisory board brought to you that you were able to solve for that franchise system?
Yeah, I'd say manufacturing was a big one. We ran into some issues with the manufacturing plant that we owned in Alabama, and things were late or the quality was off. And so that took a lot of attention. We're constantly making technology changes. We built a $5 or $6 million, system, ERP, CRM, full blown end to end, and supported our franchise owners almost with too much data at times. Sometimes you get lost in the weeds, but, from a marketing standpoint, as well as production standpoint. So we were always making improvements to that. And then it's playing whack-a-mole, Rich. It's, when you're a business owner or you're leading people, there's always going to be an issue to address. And so, maybe the call center has been, dropping more calls than usual, or the marketing missed a deadline on turning in an ad submission. There's always a little bit of whack-a-mole. And I tell a lot of, so I'm a member of the entrepreneurs organization, there are a lot of companies coming to me and say, hey, we're thinking about scaling through franchising, what do you think? And I say, hey, it's a great way to use other people's resources that also have skin in the game. They actually act as owners, which you always want as a manager. And you're able to scale more quickly. And private equity absolutely loves franchising. Acquisitions are happening now more than ever. Just tons of acquisitions if you Google around. So it can set you up for a great exit. The flip side to it is you do wake up one day and you've got kids all across North America that have expectations of you, and you're trying to keep the kids playing happy. So it does change your day to day, and you need to staff up to support that.
Makes sense. So it sounds like the 3 opportunities there that you worked through are marketing, manufacturing, and some of the technology systems, and making sure the right reporting was there. You had mentioned about 10% of your time goes towards franchises that you are at some level have ownership stake in. Do you mind sharing what those franchises are?
Yeah, where I've got the most ownership today, and they're all with partners right now, the different arrangements. And I recently sold a good bit of equity in a pool cleaning franchise, a home cleaning franchise, and a carpet cleaning franchise to one of my partners. But where we're really in growth mode and excited is, one is a driveway business. It's just a great business, so much demand in the market. The other is a rubberized coating business that really plays well with the driveway business. They're almost sister companies. And we recently acquired 2 other franchisees in the Atlanta market, expanding our footprint. We've got a 27-year-old general manager in place. He's doing great, absolutely killing it. And we just hired an associate general manager to help keep up with demand about 6 weeks ago. And then I posted literally this morning for another associate general manager. So seeing huge demand, primarily using 1099s on the fulfillment side. And we're having fun. This is one of the things I think gets lost sometimes in business ownership. We recently had an opportunity to sponsor a NASCAR, fall into our lap. And we said, hey, why not? We're getting a good deal on it. I took my 10-year-old son down to the pit, the race day. First time I'd ever been to a NASCAR race. The driver came by our house the night before. But those are the kind of things that's just fun. We wrap the car and all that. So anyway, having a good time, and it's growing, and it's highly profitable.
Very cool. So right now you have a stake in a driveway coating business and then the product of rubberized coating. Do you have a stake in any other franchises?
Yeah, and I still have a stake in those three that I mentioned: the carpet cleaning, pool cleaning, home cleaning, just a smaller one. I'm invested in two businesses at the franchisor level. I probably shouldn't disclose, those necessarily publicly at this point, but some investments there with companies that are in the process of franchising.
Got it.
Yep.
And you said the reason you're able to be 10% in those is the use of general managers. You said you have a general manager, an associate general manager you just recently put in place. You just put out an ad to get another general manager in place. Did you have experience with ShelfGenie in putting general managers in place? Was ShelfGenie able to get to the scale where they were professionally managed businesses that way?
They really preferred, and you see this sometimes, to have more of an owner-operator model. They really wanted, a lot of times you saw couples come in, and maybe one of the spouses, continued with their day job, the other one focused a little more. So you do see some models. I'd say it's a little more old school in a lot of cases where they require the owner-operator. But most of the brands that we work with, I'd say there are a few of those. By and large, though, most of them allow for a semi-absentee or a semi-passive or executive model. You'll hear all those terms. And that's where you're essentially putting a general manager in place day one, and then setting them up to run the business. And you're coaching them from the sidelines. And you're still going to have some level of involvement. If you think it's going to take 10 hours a week, it's probably going to take you 15. I try to make sure my clients go in eyes wide open. But Rich, a really good case study around this guy named Nathan Bocock, who I've done several deals with recently. 39-year-old guy, largest franchisee of 2 Men and a Truck moving service, operates in 10 markets, $30 million plus business. He's set up and he's got this organization now, and we've done several deals together where every time he puts it, not that they have to be young, but they just happen to be these young guys that he puts in place, mid-20s, kind of like we did. And he actually gives them some equity and says, hey, go make us proud, sometimes in other markets. And every deal that we've done, he's come back and bought additional locations within the first year, which is always a great, validation sign. And so I've now got him coaching my clients. So once I have a client that's ready to move forward with a purchase, I introduce them to Nathan, and we actually fund a couple of coaching calls with Nathan where he'll share with them his learnings of how do you run a business semi-absentee, how do you set your people up for success, how do you not breathe down their neck, but also, have a good pulse on what's going on.
Got it. And most of your general managers are externals. They're not internal promotions. Is that correct?
Today, and we're still in the early stages with some of these businesses. I mean, they haven't had a super long tenure, but the intention is to be able to promote within and create opportunity.
So how do you identify a performer in their job function as an internal, that they're doing a really good job as an individual performer, and then identify them as they have potential for grooming to ultimately maybe take the business as a general manager? How do you identify that individual, and what is the unique training they would get that isn't as much about their job function as it is about grooming leaders?
Yeah, I think everyone's got a slightly different answer on this. Some of the things that I have found to be successful over the years in working, leading teams and identifying talent, it's their willingness to put in the effort, really when others aren't looking, and, to share credit and, to support those around them. I'd say those are big things. Thinking back to ShelfGenie, what separated the top franchise owners from the middle of the pack, which I think can also bode well for an organization, to your question. Those that can work well with people. We oftentimes had franchisees say, hey, what separates the top from the middle of the pack? And they're like, you're answering our phones, you're making the phones ring, you're supporting us in all these different ways. What should we be doing? And my answer was inevitably work well with people, hire talent, incentivize them, retain them, make tough calls when needed, get involved in the local chamber of commerce, support the Little League baseball team, sponsor them. Those kind of things. I think, just that intuitive, ability to work with people and desire to work with people. A lot of my clients have a sales background. A lot of them don't. But I would say if you have any sales in your background, whether or not you want to sell going forward, just understanding how that works with the customer interactions allows you to hire better salespeople and manage them well. So it's kind of a roundabout answer. I think everyone would answer a little bit differently, but I'd say really just that sacrificial, not self-serving style of leadership. Doing the right thing when no one's looking.
It's interesting, John, when you mentioned sales folks. I mean, it does seem like franchise systems are perfectly suited for sales professionals to become entrepreneurs, because the systems associated with operations or finance or ERP systems or whatever are usually built for you, that you can feed the engine with the sales and the expertise you have in sales and know that the operations has been figured out over time, right? And the systems associated with that. So, if I'm a sales professional thinking about, I want to start my own business, what sometimes is the tricky part of entrepreneurism is not whether or not you can get the customers. It's whether or not you can operationally drive your business, not being a professional operator. You're a sales operator. So that really connects with me a little bit, because I do see with entrepreneurs that I work with, and I'm not in the franchising industry, so I don't have any investments in franchising, but I do have investments in small to medium-sized businesses where I back entrepreneurs and help them with their businesses. A lot of times, sales is not the issue. It's the operational component. And I think that if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the sales pitch on your side is, hey, if you want to be an entrepreneur, and you're good at sales, this is a perfect industry for you, because operationally, there's systems that help you.
Yeah. And some of my clients don't have a sales background. They say, I'm not good at sales. Well, maybe your first hire is a salesperson. You kind of offset and complement what you enjoy doing. I mean, this is your business. Let's script it for your role of what you want to do on a day-to-day basis. But John, I mean, to the point on sales, I think the types of businesses that are resonating right now, even more so, I mean, a lot of my clients aren't getting into brick and mortar physical locations, customer facing. I mean, there was an article in the New York Times came out, it was either last night or this morning, and in it talked about, non-sexy businesses or what are attracting people. And that's what I am seeing day in, day out. Non-sexy is the new sexy. It's, I've got clients buying into roll-off dumpsters, insulation, the Serve Pro type model, things that are Amazon resistant, in some cases, essential services, COVID resistant, recession resistant. I've done 3 gutters deals in the past couple of months, and it's not because people ever wanted to get in the gutter space, but they love the financial model. I mean, averaging 1.7 million per location with a 30% bottom line. I just had a Wall Street attorney outside of Boston, just down the road from you, purchased 3 locations of the gutter business. He never thought he'd be in that space, but he loved all the attributes of it. So, those are the types of businesses resonating. I mean, my driveway business, great example. And things like automotive, we're still doing a lot of oil changes, with unique models in the space, health and wellness and fitness and, anything related to kids or pets or the aging population. I mean, those things that tug at the heartstrings that people are going to spend on, regardless of the environment.
Well, it's interesting. You talked about earlier your fulfillment, and you 1099 fulfill and you build your teams. I did want to touch a little bit on this whole staffing question. I mean, there's never been a harder time right now to find good people. And so I appreciate when Rich is asking about how are you finding these GMs that are coming in cold to run this business if they're not internal and haven't learned the business. And what I love about your answer there was, a lot of times what you're seeing is the franchisees who are allocating a piece of potentially equity in that particular territory to this young entrepreneur to say, hey, I'm going to help you get your start here. And so they have sweat in the game. But beyond that, are you seeing franchisees dealing with the staffing crisis of finding good people that really want to work in maybe these non-sexy industries? Are you seeing that as a big issue?
Yes and no. Every client of mine says, hey, John, show me the opportunities to deliver the highest return on investment with the fewest number of people. Now, to a degree, they've always said that, but I'd say even more so now. But I tell them, hey, as a business owner, you're always going to be playing whack-a-mole. Right now, I mean, we're seeing demand across a lot of industries, but then, the staffing is where you have to spend a little more time. But there are ways to differentiate. A lot of times the bar out there in the competitive landscape is not that high. So if you can come in and offer, whether you offer benefits or you just offer a better environment, you take that back. And a lot of times you're bringing a white collar approach to a blue collar industry. And so take what you've learned that a lot of these folks have never been exposed to, and it really creates some neat mentoring and coaching opportunities. And, talent attracts talent. So you start building that bench of talent. In some cases, you can use 1099s. I mean, with the driveway business, we use 1099s on the fulfillment side. We only have 3 W-2s right now. And, we'll do over $1 million this year, probably close to $2 million. But we're going to bring some of those 1099s in-house over time because that's going to help our bottom line. So, there's this scaling approach to, don't try to do it all at once, but kind of build over time. Our GM is a great guy. He's not who you would think of as a GM. He was an accountant, CPA, past 5 years, ready to get out of the four-wall environment. Said, let's go build something. Yeah, you got lucky to find him.
John, quick question on you had said bringing 1099s in-house as W-2s to help the bottom line. Where what I've heard is sometimes is the opposite, that when they're 1099, there can be a split on a contract versus when you bring them in-house, you got to pay them for every hour they don't work. Yeah. How are you converting 1099 into W-2 to help the bottom line versus put it at risk?
Yeah, I think the downside, having W-2s is it can be a number of things, but one of them would be, not be able to keep them busy all the time. You're not paying, on an as needed basis or job basis. Right now, based on where our business is, if we start strategically scaling with bringing operational people in-house, again, our GM's a CPA, so I trust his numbers, but he's built out the pro forma to show us how it will impact the bottom line based on what we're paying as a rate today versus what we'd be paying with salary and benefits in-house. And, let's just say, there's a guy that it might be a $70,000 equivalent today that we're paying, but in-house we can make out to be low 50s all in. Those are kind of the numbers that we're looking at. But no, I agree with you, Rich. In a lot of cases, that's been my mindset over time is, hey, it makes more sense to outsource. And I'm a big fan of outsourcing, especially if you don't have as a business owner, it's very infrequently that you have, we need exactly 2 FTEs. Instead, you need 2.2, and then you need 2.7. And when do you hire the third, And so anyway, but we're at a point now where we need more FTEs.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, as an investor myself, if I think through diversification of portfolio, right? I'm invested in some stocks and bonds. I'm invested in some mutual funds. I have some real estate funds that I'm invested in. I don't invest in real estate specifically, but funds that invest in multifamily home real estate. Got some crypto investments. I've done some angel, maybe a little bit of VC-ish kind of investments. I don't know of any franchise investments that I can make. Can you educate me there? Like, for example, if I wanted to be an investor in franchisees and have, X amount of franchises like you have with other partners, is there a way to do that? Is there a fund, or is it really just connecting with private other investors like yourself and go, hey, John, if you have some franchise investments you're looking for some partners in, and become part of a group? How would that work as an investor who doesn't want to run the franchise, doesn't really want to be an absentee owner of a franchise, but would like to invest in the ecosystem of franchises? How does that work?
Well, first off, I'd say, be encouraged that a lot of people are thinking the same way you are right now. I hear very similar feedback.
Interesting.
And I give a talk to investor groups sometimes. We call franchising as an asset class, and I talk about, from an allocation standpoint, right now, stock market's been up here. Right now, it's pretty shaky. Interest rates still historically fairly low. Only so many good real estate deals, and so where are you going to invest outside of crypto and baseball cards? But no, I think small business ownership, kind of from a 30,000 foot level, it definitely lends itself in a lot of ways to some positive attributes, not just cash flowing, not just building an asset with exit value, but you're also able to write off expenses. So it's kind of that trifecta that you don't have as a W-2. With franchising, there's not a great play out there where you can say, hey, I want to buy X number of shares. I've done a little bit of matchmaking where I'd say, hey, you want to be totally passive, what type of business would you want to invest in? And we do more deals than 99% of other brokers out there. So we see a lot of deal flow and get involved with a lot of potential operators. We do play matchmaker sometimes on the investment side. I'd say it can become pretty cumbersome. We haven't threaded the needle as many times as we'd like to there. But what I'd say is, when you start thinking about some of these businesses that don't necessarily require a ton of hand holding, that someone can go out and get off the ground. Again, the nice thing is if you had a startup, you had someone running it for you, you'd be all over breathing down their neck. But the nice thing is with franchising, you do have a franchisor and their support team also supporting that individual. So it's not as big of a burden on you. But I'd say to invest in franchising, you do need some kind of bandwidth, even if it's 5 or 10 hours a week, to be able to coach someone up to make sure, if something goes wrong, that you step in. But there are a lot of models that are semi-absentee where, you open 5 of these and they kind of run themselves.
Yes. So you took the words elegantly that I was looking for, which is investing in franchisees an asset class? Like, is there a fund that I can go invest in that invests in all these other franchisees? And I think the answer you're giving too is a little more complex because, and you mentioned it earlier, if you have good operational or sales skills to run a franchise to begin with, there are many ways to start that franchise, whether it be loan from friends and family or ones with low startup costs or SBA loans you mentioned earlier. I'd like to learn a little bit more about. So, most people, if they want to run a franchise, can find a franchise that meets their financial needs to get them started where they really don't need investors. Is that correct?
In most cases, and some are open equity partners. So some say, hey, let's keep the cap table clean. I don't need another voice in my ear. So you see everything. I'd say ideally, it'd be great to have exposure to franchising, be able to sit in the recliner, not have to do anything. But I do find the ones that it's a good fit for, and everything, franchising is not going to be the right fit for everyone. And frankly, some people are too entrepreneurial. A lot of EO members have to tell me, hey, this isn't for you. But a lot of them also say, hey, I've been there, I've started a business, I love the idea of not having to do it again. I'd rather, have it more turnkey. I mean, once you start thinking about the types of opportunities out there, and again, I can dig into more of those, and you think about your network, and it's like, oh, actually, I do have a nephew in Chicago that, might be interested in starting something if I introduce some opportunities to him. Or, I've seen guys source younger guys through church sometimes, someone that they trust, and they're like, hey, I'd rather meet you at church than at a bar, to run my business, just like marriage. And so once you start thinking about that, and you start having conversations out there, it's amazing how often, and if you're in your mid-20s and you're thinking about leaving corporate America, put a few years in, you've got a little bit of experience, but a lot of folks are looking over their shoulder to say, what's next? There's got to be something better. And they love the idea of that autonomy. They love, you can give them a fancy title. Titles are free. I always joke about that. But a lot of people want that. And so I think there's a bigger opportunity to match investors with operators in a more systemized way. I just haven't figured out exactly the best way to do that yet. So
Gotcha.
We're still doing some beta testing around that.
Yeah, and I can certainly vouch for, in my 20s, starting up my own business was interesting. Let's get the milk crates out, let's figure out how to do this and get it done. When I got to my 30s, kind of like, maybe, but a little less so. And you get to your 40s and you're like the daunting task of starting a whole new company from scratch and coming up with a logo and going through the 2 or 3 years of pain before you can actually get something going. It's a big commitment. And a lot of people have families, they have things going on where they can't really make that leap. And so that's why, getting a faster start with a franchise would make sense. Walk me through this real quick. If Rich and I were decided, we were working in corporate America, we decided we're going to start a franchise, but we don't know what we're going to start. And we were connected with you on this Zoom call. And we were like, Jon, help us. What is your process? How would you guide us to, guys, the perfect business for you is the gutter business. You guys need a gutter franchise in Iowa. Like, how would you get from meeting us today on this call to a recommendation to this is what I think you guys should do, and here's the biggest opportunity for you?
Yeah, no, we've got a process that's very streamlined that we found to work over and over again. And what it is we'd spend some time on a call. I kind of know the probing questions to ask to get the information that I need. And so we take those data points along with what we have visibility into. We know who's doing the deals, who's got the momentum, why do they have the momentum, what's resonating with other people all across North America with your background. And so that really helps us narrow it down. We're part of the largest franchise association in the US. We work with all the different development groups. So we have a great pulse on kind of what's going on in the market. And so, let's say, New Hampshire is where you're focused. I would take all those opportunities I know could be a good fit. I would go back to the franchisors and double check, what's available, and what would be the best fit based on what you described to me. Do you like a retail location? Do you like one that's remote? Do you like a more sales-oriented, transaction-oriented, larger team, smaller team, B2C, B2B? We kind of get into all of that. And so shortly after we'd have that call, I would set up a Zoom call. I'd share my screen. We'd walk through on average 8, 9, 10 opportunities that are available in your market that kind of fit the criteria that we discussed, the financial piece, the day-to-day operational piece. And I fly at 30,000 feet, giving you an overview of each business. We also talk about the financials, talk about the leadership team, your role in the business. You would then say, hey, here are the 3 that resonate the most off the bat. 3, maybe 4 if you have the bandwidth. I would then tee up introduction calls to those franchisors. And it's entirely no obligation for you. After the first call, you may say, hey, John, that's not going to be the right fit. Or, hey, John, that's not the right fit, but it gave me some great ideas. Maybe we look at some businesses that now have these characteristics. Like your thinking is going to evolve as we go through it. You're going to flex that muscle of how do you analyze option A versus option B and weigh the pros and cons. And so we serve as a sounding board all through the process. As you're talking with these franchisors, they'll take you through an overview through unit economics, where they get into the financials. They'll take you through the franchise disclosure document, help you define territory. They'll introduce you to other franchisees within their system. You get to do what's called validation, where you get to ask them a lot of questions. It culminates in what's called a discovery day. This is usually a month or 2 down the road from that initial call. But discovery day, where you spend a day and a half on site with a franchisor and their team at their home office, making sure you understand everything about the business. They want to get to know you better, make sure it's the right fit both ways. And then you sail off into the sunset if it's the right one. So that's how we found it can be an iterative process, but it really narrows down that field, because in the US alone, there's 4,000 franchise brands. Roughly half of those are in food and lodging. Those are 2 industries that we stay away from. And so then the other half, is where we go really deep. And, we've done the vetting, because they're not all created equal, but we've been able to see success stories. We know most of these franchisors, so we bring all that into play into making our recommendations.
John, I'm curious. I wrote down notes on your process. My assumption is the disposition with a candidate is we're here to help you find the best fit for you. And I'm confident just from the short time together that is what's in your heart.
Yeah.
Well, on the back end, there are some franchisors that might pay 60 or 75 grand, and there's some franchisors that might pay 15 or 20. How do you stay non-biased, genuinely interested in the individual when you're looking at such a disparity of payday?
Yeah. Over 90% of our agreements are cookie cutter across the board. So it doesn't vary that much on the back end. So honestly, that never comes into my thinking. As I work with them, I show them the best opportunities, because unless the deal's done, we don't get paid. So we're going to show them the ones that are the best fit, that we think they'll resonate with the most. And, we just had a new website go up recently. I had clients writing testimonials for the new website. And Rich, it is so encouraging to see kind of what's happened. I mean, almost every one of my clients has come back and bought additional locations after the fact. They've come back and bought additional brands. They've referred friends and family. I mean, I feel like we've got a really good thing going, because we do what's right by the client. And I've only had one client where it hasn't worked out for them. They're about 3 hours outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Great guy, but it was a mosquito business. And and he realized several months in that, without being on the ground, he didn't have friends and family in the market to kind of do those grassroots efforts to get it off the ground. He's like, this is going to be a little too much effort. I need to throw in the towel. So, all the parties ended on a good note, but he's the only one that I've had that's not still in business.
That's impressive. Twice you mentioned private equity. I'd like to know more about how that works. How does that work, and why would a franchisor accept private equity money from a non-active funding source, where the accountability on the franchise agreement is private equity, who's typically positioned to buy something and flip it, and known sometimes private equity to not always make the best decisions for a brand or people, because private equity is in it to create more money. Like, how does all that get leveled out to be in the best interest of everybody involved?
Yeah. And of course, it's not to say in every case it is, but my experience in the Driveway company that I'm a part of, it was bought by private equity last year. Well, they also, flipped out a new website a month later, because they put a lot of money into the business, and we got new logos, new marketing. They're supporting us in a lot of ways. And so the relationship that I've seen between private equity and franchisors, and sometimes they'll come in at the franchisee level and buy a large swath, of Orange Theories, or they may come in like with pods, movable storage, and they bought back a lot of the franchisees, turned them into corporate locations, which gave an exit to the franchisees. they love private equity, franchising for all the same reasons I said. Franchising, is a great fit for a lot of folks. The thing with private equity is they're looking to infuse money into the system typically. I mean, they want to grow. So if there's 50 locations today, they want to see that grow to 200 locations. Well, if they grow to 200 locations, the franchise system is going to have a lot more resources. They can do a lot more in marketing. Marketing is the one that kind of comes to mind, most naturally, but investing in systems, investing in technology. I mean, some of these private equity firms, I think of Eagle Merchant, they're an Atlanta-based private equity firm. They own Chicken Salad Chicks. They just bought Code Ninjas. They own several others. They're able to kind of share best practices between the brands, and you'll provide almost like a board of director type governance and feedback loop. Princeton Equity Group actually just bought the mosquito business that I was talking about at the franchisor level. And it's a great leadership team. It's a good business. But that group's been calling me all the time saying, hey, what are you seeing out there? At the franchisor level, we're in acquisition mode. We've got a couple $100 million mandate to spend on franchising. ShelfGenie, we sold to Neighborly. It's a larger group. Very, very common. It's just kind of how it works. But if you're a franchisor, it's an opportunity. You built a business, chance for you to cash out a little bit. At the same time, instead of bringing in funding on the debt side, or it just gives you another access to capital. Because as a franchisor, to make your money early on, you're not going to get rich on the franchise fee. The royalty stream early on with your first couple of franchisees is really paying to support, keep your home office team employed and supporting them. Over time, that royalty stream can become meaningful, but it's really, if you have a vertical integration piece, that's where you can capitalize. And a lot of PE groups are rolling companies together under an umbrella. You see a lot of umbrella companies out there, whether it be Buzz Brands or Neighborly, Happy Nest. And then there are a lot of synergies on the back end.
So when you talked about the royalty stream growing over time, what have you seen as far as how franchisors might scale their support for their bigger businesses? Because when somebody comes in and they're an owner operator, has a couple of staff members and few clients, like, boy, they're getting a deal on that royalty because they're getting all that training. But then all of a sudden they're in the business for 5, 7, 10 plus years. And now they have a massive business. They look at their P&L and they go, look how much money I'm paying them. I know what I'm doing. I'm not sure I actually need them anymore. How have you seen successful franchisors respond to that?
Yeah, I think it keeps the franchisor on their toes. They've got to constantly be innovating. And of course, that's a buzzword, but tangibly speaking, they need to be providing support that you would oftentimes have to pay someone else to provide. So, in the case of ShelfGenie, again, we had marketing teams we had a media buying team, we had a graphic design team, we had a digital marketing team. Well, our franchisees would have had to go out and source those things on their own if we weren't providing them for them. So we were providing a tangible value, saving them money in a way. We're also able to provide them with bulk buying. So we're able to get things going with Gannett, that large national newspaper company, pay-per-click and pay-per-performance programs they never could have done on an individual market level. So we're able to group our buying power, get lower prices, get better agreements. But those are the kind of things that as a franchisor, you've got to keep adding to that to show that value that you're providing. Because as a franchisor, you want to keep the franchisees happy. You don't want that franchise advisory group, coming at you saying, hey, what are you providing to us? And they're very vocal. If they didn't like one of our team members and they weren't being well supported, we knew all about it. So it is kind of this interesting dynamic for sure. It's kind of a hybrid. It's a B2B, B2C type hybrid where, they're business owners, but they're spending their own money. And, they're much more reluctant to just throw the Amex card out there. So it keeps you honest.
Love it. Jon, in Q3 of this year, I think you have a book coming out, really focused on the area you've been highlighting, which is the non-food franchising industry. There's probably around 2,000 of them out there. But tell us more about this book. Like, why should our listeners get this book? What will they learn from it? And how could it help them along their analysis of this whole franchising industry space?
Yeah, first off, I'd say, we're happy to share a free copy with all of your listeners. If you come to our website, which I'm sure will be in the show notes, and sign up for our monthly newsletter, we'll make sure that you get a copy of the book. But no, really excited about this one. I actually wrote one other book in the past, and we got to the end, and I felt like we could do better work. And so we've totally revamped it. And so we actually never published the first one. It's still sitting there, but really excited about what we built into this one. We talked about different client testimonials and kind of what's going on in their situations, what their backgrounds were, the type of industries they got into. We really go soup to nuts. I mean, we have a chapter on legal, chapter on funding, a chapter on the financial rewards, potential, the item 19 of the FDD. We talk about the types of industries. We talk about how does the process work, really soup to nuts, everything you could want to know in a very readable format. It'll be between 100 and 150 pages. And I think it's going to be a great precursor for a lot of folks in their knowledge as they learn more about, this world that oftentimes gets overlooked.
Got it. Love it. And certainly we've talked a lot about franchising, franchisees, really it leads to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurism. But one underlying topic I know you're very passionate about is leadership and growing leaders. Can you tell me a little bit about this initiative, Growing Leaders, that you have and what you're doing with that?
Oh, appreciate it. No, had the opportunity to serve on the board for a number of years for a great organization. I recently rolled off this organization called Growing Leaders. And it's all about empowering that next generation and setting them up. I mean, we're only going to be as good as our next generation. And so I think, there's so many negative headlines out there and just noise. And for them to get, those time-tested, character type principles distilled in a way that's very understandable through our curriculum and our programming, something that we're passionate about. And we look for other opportunities similar to that. I've got young kids and, I think try to live my life by, stewardship, policy of, to whom much is given, much is expected. So we try to be good stewards of our time and resources, and we fail all the time, but that's kind of our North Star that we look towards.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for your contributions to that, because you're right. I mean, the future generation of leaders or entrepreneurs or ones that are worth spending time on and investing in, and absolutely love that. Thank you so much for your insight today. Fantastic. I still want to figure out how I can be Shaq one day and own a whole bunch of franchises. I'll have to talk to you a bit more about that offline, because that certainly seems like a good investment for a lot of investors, is investing in franchises as an asset class. I just don't know how to do it. But either way, it certainly strikes me that if you're an entrepreneur looking to get into the entrepreneur landscape, not sure where to start, you'd probably be one of my first calls. So I really appreciate that time, and we look forward to spreading that word.
Thanks, Jon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode. So Rich, obviously you've been spending a lot of time in the franchising industry as Jon has. And, we talked a lot about today, the trends that Jon's seeing a little bit in the non-real estate service related businesses. I know that's the business that you're involved with as well. I just find it interesting that coming back full circle is this non-sexy service-based industry as one that is now very attractive for entrepreneurs to be investing in. What are your thoughts on that? And are you seeing that as a trend? Obviously, you're in that business, so maybe a little biased, but what are you seeing?
Well, I'll tell you, all the ones that he talked about, it occurred to me that they were home service involved, between pool cleaning, home cleaning, carpet cleaning, driveway coating. Those are all, I assume, mostly home service opposed to commercial service. And what we've experienced is it's a relatively recession-proof industry. And even when there is a recession, all it does is just create pent-up demand. I mean, think about the driveway coating business. Sure, in a recession, people may be scared and don't have as much money, so they're not going to coat their driveway for a year or a year and a half. Well, then as things pull out of the recession, guess what? There are a whole bunch more driveways that are overdue for getting coated. Like, you actually never lose that business, which makes it somewhat recession-proof. Are there dips? Are there peaks and valleys? Absolutely. But all it does is continue to create pent-up demand. Versus, I don't think it's the same in the food service or the lodging industry. So you don't go out to eat during COVID for 9 months or a year. And by the way, that's not an implication that COVID's over, but during nationwide quarantine and nobody's going out to eat for 9 months. Mm-hmm. Sure, there's a little spike that, woohoo, we get to go out to eat. And a few more people go out to eat, but you don't have pent-up demand. Correct. Of 9 months of revenue that you're ever going to recapture. Yeah.
What I also love in not only the services space that you're talking about, but when you're focused in on a territory, and you can build relationships long-term in that community. To your point, they're going to get their house painted. It's not a question whether they're going to get it painted or not. They may delay it a year or two because of recession, but they're going to get it painted at some point. And what I love about the franchising space is the reliability that comes along with it, specifically in the home services industry. As an example, if I was looking to get my deck done, my gutters done, my whatever done, the daunting task of calling 3 to 5 contractors, to have 2 call me back, to have 1 show up, you don't have that issue, in my experience, in the franchising space. Now, you may pay a little premium for that in terms of their rates or their service or whatever, but you also are getting a premium value of reliability that I think is lacking in that home services space, quite honestly.
Yeah, absolutely agree. A benefit of franchising in these home service spaces is when that pent-up demand gets unleashed. I have experienced, we saw with CertaPro, that franchises are positioned to take an unfair share of that market share because they are well put together, well thought out, well funded. They're conglomerates of very smart people as the franchisors and franchisees who are waiting in position for that wave to come of pent-up demand. Yep. And we captured more market share after COVID at that rate than we were before, because we were positioned to take advantage of the pent-up demand better than your typical chuck in a truck.
Yep. So I have a business proposition to throw out there.
I'm in. What are we doing?
So I think I've connected a few dots in this conversation. I throughout the whole conversation, I'm thinking, how can I participate in investing in the franchise industry? Because most people that are going to run a franchise, they either have the means to come up with the startup fee, or they can get it through SBA loans, or they can get it through different means and start their own business. So take that as one part of the story. The second part of the story is, remember all the conversations we used to have with Jeff Wall and other former colleagues about what are we going to do with this College Pro painting business? And College Pro had determined, I think over the years here in the United States at least, that college students painting people's homes wasn't necessarily working the way that they had wanted it to work. And they were always trying to find an alternative to that business. But the concept of taking entrepreneurs at a young age and teaching them entrepreneur skills through a franchise was very attractive. What if there was a concept of taking young entrepreneurs, college age students or a little bit older, and investing in them to start their own franchise with you backing them? Think about College Pro, but College Pro franchising, which is college students and or young professionals can apply to get interviewed, screened, and if they qualify, we will help them find a franchise of their choice and back them on that journey. And it's almost like a mutual fund of entrepreneurs that you throw out and help them get started with running their own franchise. Is that a crazy idea?
Yeah, it's interesting. You'd mentioned College Pro and starting entrepreneurs. I don't know if you remember, College Pro actually changed the tagline to "Entrepreneurs Start Here." That was actually like the tagline. So there was an absolute belief in that. And what you're talking about, it's an interesting concept. It's almost like the Shark Tank of franchising, but the people who would come in front of the Shark Tank of investors are really selling themselves on their ability to be a fast starter in franchising, opposed to selling a product. I think that's an interesting opportunity. And John might be the one who can give some guidance on something like that.
Yeah, I just thought it connects the dots. Like, I love young people becoming entrepreneurs, but the idea of them starting their entire business and going through all the learning curve of a full startup, sales, operations, HR, payroll, accounting, it's daunting. But to give young entrepreneurs a start by helping them, create their own beginning franchise with a backing of an experienced entrepreneur who's investing in them, seems like an interesting matchmaking service between young entrepreneurs and experienced investor entrepreneurs that can help them run their own business. So just a concept, maybe something to explore a little further, but a business idea that came to mind.
I'll play catch with you for a minute here and go, isn't there an opportunity for young entrepreneurs, instead of having the entire weight of the franchise on them, to fill one of the roles like that Jon recently advertised for and be a general manager of a business with an equity opportunity. So is there an opportunity? Is there a space for a company like Jon's, but instead of matchmaking franchisee with franchisor, it's matchmaking general managers with franchisees?
Yeah. So to throw the ball back, just changing that wording a little bit, as opposed to general managers, because titles are free, as Jon articulated, why not find beginning entrepreneurs who want to run their own business, just don't have the expertise and or the capital to kind of buy a franchise, get backed by an experienced mentor, big brother entrepreneur who's already been an entrepreneur before, but can lay down the capital, lay down the expertise, and give that beginning entrepreneur 20% of the business, if you will, to kind of run it in addition to their salary and participate in the upside. You can call them GM, you can call them beginning entrepreneur, you can call them whatever, but it's a similar concept to what you're talking about. I love the idea of matchmaking young entrepreneurs with experienced entrepreneurs who also are interested in investing in this space and finding a franchise system that they can actually go build with a mentor, experienced investor entrepreneur.
Yeah, interesting thought. I appreciated one of the things that Jon provided. Like, he was pretty tight on a few things. One of the things was, yeah, everybody comes to me and wants to know what's the highest return on investment with the lowest number of people. Yep. I was like, I don't know that I've ever heard it said quite that succinctly. He must hear that a lot. And there are a number of things I took notes on within here and just felt it was a valuable podcast.
Yeah, no doubt. Certainly, if you are ever going to look into the franchising business, working with a broker like Jon, I think is essential, because you're going to pay the franchise fee, whether you go direct to the franchise or you work with a broker. It doesn't make a difference. And have somebody who is working with 500 brands and maybe more, who can find the perfect fit for you as a consultant to you at no cost to you, it's an absolute no-brainer.